So branches part 2. So we just left off with epistemology, and now we're going to turn to our remaining branches. Now, so a quick passing note about epistemology. As you can see in the lecture notes, I give an example that, let's pretend you're a young child. You're walking around the house, investigating the world around you, because that's what we do. And you see in the kitchen the stove, and you don't really know what a stove is. You see your parents standing by it quite often, but you don't actually know what it is. And at this point, your inattentive parents have left the stove on. And it's a coil stove, and they've left it on, and so the coils are kind of glowing that really nice, like, kind of bright orange-red color, right? And as a young precocious child, you want to investigate. So you go up to the stove, and you throw your hand on it, right? And you obviously burn your hand. You let out a yelp. Your inattentive parents come running in, and they try to coddle you, etc. Now, with that, the empiricist will say that you derived very particularly a certain type of knowledge about what it is you just experienced. Okay? You experienced that pain from those coils, so chances are you will associate in your mind not to touch those coils when they are that color. Right? That knowledge stemmed directly from that experience. Now, under rationalism, and you can see there on the back side of my sheet anyway, let's say you're a couple years later, you're at this house, and there's a fire in the backyard, just kind of a nice little barbecue. And your mind associates the color of those coils with the colors of the flames, and your mind makes some sort of connection, right, from what it was you did experience, yes, but there's something happening independent of that experience in the mind itself. And you derive knowledge, you derive a proposition that perhaps that fire is indeed hot. Okay? And so you can see that is the example that I give there. So sorry that wasn't included in the previous video. Now, the next branch of philosophy, logic. Logic is the study of rational argumentation. The study of do valid premises lead to valid conclusions. It's very systematic, it's very formulated, and insofar as one can rationalize, one can analyze arguments, we can decipher whether or not an argument is valid or invalid. Often based on structure, often based on the way that the argument is presented. And philosophers of a particular type spend their careers doing logic, doing very kind of almost mathematical equations, mathematical proofs as it relates to argumentation and argumentative formulation. And we'll encounter logic as we work through this semester, so just keep that in the back of the mind, but in particular, just a passing note. Now the next branch, axiology, theories of value. Looking at how we value what we value and why we value what we value. I know it's kind of a mouthful. Looking at what we value, how we value it, and why we value what we value. And in particular, I would say that most of our lives are built on evaluations. Most of our lives are built on things that we evaluate day after day after day after day. This morning when I woke up to have a particular breakfast over another kind of particular breakfast, that was an evaluation. This shirt was an evaluation. I chose to wear this one as opposed to something else, right? So axiology is going to look at why and how we make value determinations. So, and we'll encounter more of this subject on our next actual lecture, I believe tomorrow or Thursday. Now, various branches of axiology, aesthetics, looking at what we constitute as beautiful, how we determine beauty, how we understand beauty. Is beauty an objective property in the world, or is it merely subjective? Right? We hear the phrase "eye of the beholder." Okay. Also, under the heading of axiology is the study of social and political philosophy, looking at what type of government is best, what type of government we ought value, and why. And how do we change those systems if we don't agree with what they are? Okay. And then lastly, under the heading of axiology, is ethics. So the study of this 4-week course, the study of what it is we're going to do, is now we've arrived there. So ethics sometimes is seen as a branch of philosophy in particular, but it does fall under axiology because ethics looks at how we understand how it is we ought to act, and that's an evaluation. Okay. So as you can see here, ethics begins with a concern of individual character, including what we blandly call being a good person, but it also looks at behavior. Right? When I say that this action is right, this action is wrong, this action is good, this action is bad, what I'm doing is I'm making evaluations. Right? And so as we think about ethics and we think about ethical propositions in those terms, we can start to understand why perhaps ethics is housed under axiology. Because ultimately when we think about value and value determinations, even when it comes to morality, when it comes to ethics, right, those are moral and ethical evaluations. Now, if you are taking notes, I would recommend that you have ethics as kind of this branch under axiology, but now we have ethics and we're going to have various branches coming off of ethics. And as you can see here, as you can see here, types of ethics listed there at the bottom. Now, various types of ethics is we have descriptive ethics, which is more of kind of an anthropological study that'll go out and investigate how a group of people acts, right? Just to kind of describe their patterns of behavior, but it doesn't try to perhaps change those patterns of behavior. More, it's just kind of looking at the descriptive nature of those programs. Normative ethics, however, and normative is kind of a weird word, but think of it in terms of norms. Okay? Norms, like norms of behavior. What is normal for one to do? Okay? So how ought we act? And when we think about normative ethics, it looks to try to generate and identify the norms or standards of correct behavior. Asking the question, how ought one act? And we'll return to that question throughout these next 4 weeks. How ought one act? Because perhaps that question is not as easy as it seems. Okay? And to answer that question, there are various types of normative ethical theories, and you can see them listed there. We will encounter them in the next 4 weeks, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them right now. Another branch of ethics is meta-ethics. And so again, thinking about metaphysics, now we have meta-ethics. So looking at, again, going beyond just what is merely accepted. Meta-ethics being looking at focusing on the nature of ethical concepts and justifications. So when I say the word good, when I say that is a good action, what am I actually saying? How am I using the word good? Right? Or if I say that's a bad action, right? How am I using the word bad? These concepts of good, bad, right, wrong, good and evil, right? Those terms ought to be unpacked a little bit more. Okay? And I have a nice little story to share to that end, and I think that this is just kind of a nice, just a nice little anecdote for meta-ethical study here. And this is from the textbook that I use in the live version of the class here at the U of I. Yeah, it's very short, but I think it's quite nice. Okay? So this is by Mark Twain, yeah, it's just a nice little anecdote to understand and examine metaphysics. All right, so today in a wood we heard a voice with a capital V. We hunted for it but could not find it. Adam said he had heard it before but had never seen it. It was the Lord of the garden, he had said, and it said we must not eat of the fruit of a certain tree, and that if we ate of it we would surely die. Adam said it was the tree of good and evil. Good and evil? Yeah. Well, what is that? What is what? Why those things? What is good? I don't know. How should I know? Well, then what is evil? I suppose it's the name of something, but I do not know what. But Adam, you must have an idea of what it is. Why should I have some idea of it? I've never seen the thing. How am I to form any conception of it? What is your own notion of it? Well, of course I had none, and it was unreasonable for me to require him to have one. There was no way for either of us to guess what it might be. It was a new word, like the other. We had not heard them before, and they meant nothing to us. So again, thinking about how we use these terms of right, wrong, good and evil, good and bad, and kind of pushing upon and pushing a little bit further. Okay? So that's the nature of metaethical study. Then lastly, the branch of ethics is applied ethics, of examining how what it is we study in these next 4 weeks in ethical study in general can be applied to various areas of human existence. And as you can see, there's a couple of examples of applied ethics, such as medicine. Right? We have medical ethics, how we ought to act within a medical sphere with life-ending decisions. Right? Is it ever permissible to promote physician-assisted suicide? Right? How ought one act near the end of one's life? Well, how ought one be treated, rather, and accounted for in really unfortunate situations? Sexual ethics, how ought one act with regards to one's sexual behavior? Is it permissible to have more than one partner? Is it permissible, and what are our responsibilities? What are our responsibilities if we do have more than one sexual partner? How ought one act with regards to one's sexual choices? That's a very, very challenging question. It's a very, very important question, especially in kind of the college years. We have sports ethics. What constitutes as being ethical with regards to sports? Okay. And we can throw a couple of names out here. Lance Armstrong, Barry Bonds, and a handful of others that obviously have had their glory taken away because they have used performing-enhancing drugs that are claimed to be unethical. Okay. So how does one act ethical with regards to sport and contest? Environmental ethics, how ought one act with regards to the environment? Do we have any obligations to the environment? Do we have any obligations to future generations with regards to how we engage with the environment? Business ethics, whenever money's involved, things get a little tricky, perhaps. How ought we act in a business setting? If we're beholden to stakeholders, but perhaps that means that we create some sort of ethically questionable decision, perhaps displacing a third world community for the sake of profit, for the sake of production. Is that ethical? So thinking about all of the ways that we can apply what it is we're going to do the next 4 weeks, I think is really important. Because I think everything that we study can be influenced and impacted in our lives of 2016. And as we'll start to investigate, particularly by the end of this week and early next week when we get into the actual theories, we will see, pardon me, we will see that ultimately what we can do in here can be taken out in the world. So hopefully this was a nice kind of introductory, get us thinking about philosophy and seeing that ultimately it is far-reaching, it is wide, it is deep, and ultimately it can touch so many various areas of inquiry. That it's alive, it's passionate, and then ultimately we can focus on so many really invigorating areas of intellectual development and philosophical inquiry. So until next time.